Direi che possiamo cominciare il nostro pomeriggio, possiamo cominciare il nostro seminario intitolato Teaching as Storytelling e in primis veramente ci tengo a ringraziare il professor Kieran Egan che è venuto anche in questa occasione con grande disponibilità, è venuto presso il nostro Ateneo e quindi dico con grande disponibilità perché effettivamente è pieno di impegni in questo periodo in Italia e quindi è riuscito tuttavia, nonostante i numerosissimi impegni diciamo di queste giornate, è riuscito comunque a venire a tenere questo seminario per noi. Ecco, quindi veramente gli siamo molto grati di questo, consapevoli che sicuramente è un'occasione importante sia per il nostro centro di ricerca, quindi per i temi che il nostro centro di ricerca, Metaphor e Narrative in Science, persegue, sia per le tematiche del nostro dipartimento e proprio per questa didattica anche delle scienze in una dimensione interdisciplinare che ci è particolarmente cara, che costituisce sicuramente uno dei nostri assi portanti di ricerca. Oggi è presente anche la professoressa Bartolini che sicuramente è tra i docenti del Dipartimento che ha avviato questo ambito di indagine che avendo anche un ruolo pionieristico nell'ambito delle scienze matematiche, non solo per noi ma in generale, ecco, essendo una studiosa ovviamente molto nota anche all'estero. E quindi ringrazio tutti i colleghi che oggi sono qui in generale per essere con noi e avere insieme questo momento di riflessione, tutti gli studenti, supervisori del tirocinio, tutti quelli insomma che oggi sono venuti a essere qua da noi. Io farò una brevissima presentazione per non rubare del tempo. Volevo solo ricordarvi questo tema il fatto che il tema dello storytelling naturalmente si inserisce all'interno di una problematica molto vasta e di fatto il tema dell'importanza della narrazione all'interno di una dimensione didattica, educativa, comunicativa oggi è un tema di grande rilevanza. Questo all'interno anche di svariate discipline ed è stato affrontato in modi diversi all'interno di queste discipline. Sicuramente uno dei riferimenti teorici quando si parla di questa dimensione narrativa può essere anche considerato Brunner, che è un autore che molti di voi conoscono anche perché è un autore che è venuto spesso, è anche, uno studioso che è venuto anche spesso a Reggio Emilia, ecco, che abbiamo anche avuto spesso qui con noi. Anche quando già era molto anziano e veniva a Reggio Emilia e però trovava il modo di venirci a trovare e anche di fare delle conferenze presso il nostro dipartimento. E quindi sicuramente il tema della narrazione anche ha avuto questa particolare risonanza nel momento in cui appariva non semplicemente come fosse una dimensione legata all'evasione, legato a uno spazio che poteva essere così proprio in qualche modo separato dall'ambito della conoscenza, dall'ambito della scienza, ma invece considerato come un modo di pensiero. E questo, sapete, nella classica formulazione di Brunner ci sarebbero queste due diverse modalità di pensiero, perché abbiamo da un lato il pensiero paradigmatico che è classicamente il pensiero scientifico e poi abbiamo il pensiero narrativo che è un modo di conoscere, però si avvale di procedimenti diversi, quindi se il pensiero paradigmatico tende a procedere in una maniera più logico-formale, invece il pensiero narrativo è un pensiero che ha diverse modalità proprio di azione, di collegamento, però è un modo comunque per dare ordine, connessione, per mettere in forma le nostre conoscenze. Quindi non è che non sia una forma di conoscenza, è una forma di conoscenza diversa perché non è deduttiva, non si avvale dei procedimenti formali che invece sono tipici per esempio della logica e anche, diciamo, dell'indagine scientifica, come viene, come posso dire, in qualche modo formalizzata, no? Quindi anche attraverso delle formule matematiche. E altro elemento molto importante, la sua finalità del pensiero narrativo non è tanto la spiegazione, ma è la comprensione, quindi anche è la ricerca del significato, diciamo, delle cose, il significato degli eventi. Ovviamente non solo degli eventi personali, ma anche degli eventi in generale, anche delle cose del mondo, potremmo dire. E effettivamente Brunner a volte può dare l'impressione, no, di contrapporre queste due diverse modalità, ma in realtà, se noi andiamo a leggere meglio i suoi testi, ci rendiamo conto che non è una contrapposizione in senso stretto, cioè c'è più l'esigenza di sottolineare come il pensiero narrativo sia un pensiero a tutti gli effetti. Ecco, quindi c'è una, se volete, una enfatizzazione per certi versi delle caratteristiche specifiche, ma perché si dice, attenzione, abbiamo a che fare proprio con una forma di pensiero, non con uno spazio così di divertimento. Ecco, e tra l'altro diciamo che queste tesi di Brunner sono state anche recuperate oggi diciamo, dalla narratologia, dagli studi della narrazione, che hanno visto come noi nella narrazione possiamo rintracciare delle strutture che sono veramente le stesse strutture che poi ritroviamo anche quando noi cerchiamo di conoscere, di mettere in ordine gli eventi, no? Per esempio i rapporti di causa-effetto, i rapporti temporali, no? Quello che accade prima, quello che accade dopo. E quindi sicuramente diciamo che c'è tutto un filone che ha studiato la letteratura, la narrazione, anche cercando di coglierne la rilevanza, diciamo, per una dimensione che è quella anche proprio dell'insegnamento e in particolar modo l'insegnamento delle scienze. Diciamo, questo ambito della dimensione narrativa e delle potenzialità per lo studio scientifico è una dimensione molto importante che ha avuto sicuramente negli ultimi anni molta rilevanza. Ci sono molti progetti, anche se voi pensate in vari contesti europei, che hanno studiato il tema da diversi punti di vista, ovviamente, però sono tanti, veramente ormai sono tanti gli studi all'interno di questo ambito. Ecco, questi sono alcuni degli strumenti cognitivi che sono presupposti, diciamo, dalla narrazione, no? Quindi dicevamo prima i rapporti di successione temporale, no? Prima e poi, rapporti di causa-effetto, il concetto di agent, il concetto di agency, quindi di causalità, di effettività, ecco. Quindi l'idea è che ci sia continuità tra il pensiero narrativo e il pensiero scientifico. Questo è un elemento sicuramente che è molto presente negli studi contemporanei, no? Quindi non si vede una frattura, si vede la continuità. La continuità non vuole dire che sia identità, è ben inteso, però non c'è diciamo, una frattura. Ecco, allora per venire al professor Egan, il professor Egan ha un curriculum estremamente ampio, insomma, nel senso che è uno studioso molto noto a livello internazionale. E quindi noi qui abbiamo isolato semplicemente alcuni elementi particolarmente significativi, senza ovviamente la pretesa di restituire, no, un percorso intellettuale così ricco e così significativo. Sicuramente diciamo, la carriera accademica del professor Egan si è sviluppata in diversi continenti, anche possiamo dire, no? Perché appunto è nato in Irlanda e poi ha studiato anche in Inghilterra, no? Diciamo anche appunto a Londra, dopodiché diciamo, ha lavorato sempre in questo ambito, però poi una parte importante invece diciamo della sua formazione è avvenuta prima, diciamo, appunto a Stanford, dove ha conseguito il dottorato di ricerca, e poi dopo invece in Canada, in questa prestigiosa università canadese, dove ha avuto, diciamo, forse, diciamo, gli anni più lunghi, ecco, della sua carriera accademica. E diciamo una dei filoni, ecco, della sua attività di ricerca si legano anche a questo centro di ricerca, vedete, proprio legato a questa dimensione immaginativa dell'educazione. Vedete il centro appunto che ha la parola immaginazione all'interno anche della sua definizione, no? Questo Imaginative Education, e che appunto cerca di utilizzare tutte le risorse anche dell'immaginazione per conoscere, no? Per conoscere meglio, per conoscere di più, e dal punto di vista anche formativo, educativo, e quindi dal punto di vista dei processi di apprendimento. Noi l'abbiamo messo prima, avremmo dovuto metterlo dopo, perché effettivamente ci rendiamo conto che siamo un pochino megalomani, insomma, però effettivamente il professor Fraser è anche membro del comitato scientifico del nostro centro di ricerca, del nostro centro di ricerca Mythic and Narrative Science, e siamo molto orgogliosi naturalmente che faccia parte del nostro comitato scientifico. Ecco, il professor Egan è molto noto anche per questo programma di insegnamento chiamato Learning in Depth, che è già stato sperimentato in diversi paesi con dei risultati eccellenti e anche a Modena, diciamo il comune di Modena, diciamo che sicuramente ha avviato all'interno di alcune sue istituzioni educative una sperimentazione molto importante di appunto questo metodo, su cui forse magari alcuni di voi sono già informati, ecco, perché è un metodo abbastanza famoso, e però insomma se qualcuno poi fosse interessato su questo possiamo tornare magari anche alla fine della conferenza e possiamo porre qualche domanda al professore su questa metodologia. Ecco, sicuramente una metodologia che cerca fortemente di attivare l'interesse degli studenti per promuovere un apprendimento significativo. Ecco, credo che uno degli aspetti più interessanti sia anche questo, cioè promuovere un apprendimento significativo che consenta allo studente, anche quando è all'inizio della sua formazione, di avere quella passione per l'apprendimento che noi troviamo spesso solamente quando si arriva invece alla fine, cioè quando si è ricercatori magari, no? Quando si è ricercatori dopo che ci si è laureati, no? Quando si ha la passione per la ricerca. E qui invece il tentativo è di far partire presto, sfruttando la curiosità che i bambini hanno, no? La curiosità e anche la passione che i bambini hanno e che a volte bisogna solo andare ad attivare. Ecco, e un altro testo che è molto importante, che è stato anche tradotto in italiano del professor Egan, quindi che si trova diciamo facilmente, perché è un testo che è stato ristampato tante volte in Italia, è questo testo intitolato La comprensione multipla, in cui viene proposto un modello alternativo a quello tradizionale, perché c'è proprio l'idea, diciamo, da un lato di una successione, di una possibile successione, no, di vari modelli di apprendimento, no, in cui si vanno a privilegiare di volta in volta le capacità più legate a certe fasce d'età. E però diciamo che tutte queste varie fasi, chiamiamole così, in realtà non vanno intese come fasi per cui una finisce e comincia l'altra in modo rigido, ma poi c'è una coimplicazione, per cui di fatto è come se noi ci portassimo sempre dentro tutte queste fasi, no? Man mano che noi cresciamo, noi diventiamo grandi, non è che perdiamo la comprensione somatica più legata alla nostra dimensione corporea o la dimensione mitica più legata alla dimensione, diciamo, in qualche modo immaginativa, eccetera, eccetera, ma ce le portiamo dietro, ecco. Però è vero che non è che si arrivi diciamo già da piccoli a possedere un pensiero formalizzato a tutti gli effetti, e questo dovrebbe essere qualcosa di scontato, no? Cioè, nel senso che tutti lo sappiamo, però a volte invece già ai livelli scolastici molto diciamo iniziali, vediamo intervenire invece così proprio un approccio che privilegia, ecco, già un linguaggio complesso, difficile, astratto, e sicuramente con delle ricadute non sempre positive sui processi di apprendimento. Ecco, queste sono alcune delle linee guida insomma, che hanno caratterizzato la ricerca del professor Egan, però adesso non voglio rubare altro tempo. e quindi direi che possiamo sicuramente passare la parola al professore con l'idea poi di poter tranquillamente porre domande anche rispetto, dicevamo, al chiarimento di concetti che magari non fossero del tutto trasparenti anche per motivi di carattere linguistico. Passo tutto al professore, il video anche dovrebbe spostare.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you going to leave me? You're going to... I'll be all alone here. I'm sorry I don't speak Italian. Est mea maxima culpa. Next time, I will. So the topic I am to talk about is teaching us storytelling. And I'm assured that everybody here speaks English fluently. And if you don't, I can't do anything about it. And as Anna Maria has suggested, that when we are talking about stories, it's not in any narrow sense of once upon a time kinds of stories, but rather really something about the way the mind is enabled to think, to shape our experience into story structures, that the story is a significant part of the way our minds work to make sense of the world that we're a part of. And I will be exploring just some aspects of that way in which we make sense of our world. And I'll want to focus on at least one of the things that Anna Maria has mentioned in the book on imaginative education. So I'll look at some features of that to explore the ways in which stories can enrich our experience, maybe in dimensions that we have not thought much about before. The other item that Anna Maria mentioned was the new program called Learning in Depth, and if we have time, we could discuss that later. I had imagined this was designed as a seminar, and I imagined us sitting around a table rather than like this, but we will do what we can. So if I'm going to talk a little bit about imaginative education, one question is what's new about it, and in some way what is new, maybe to some of you at least, about what I will be talking about today is it is built on some theories about how knowledge grows in the mind that are maybe not entirely conventional and familiar. And that also focuses a little on how our imaginations work and how our imaginations help us to make sense of our world more richly and comprehensively. And what we have been doing in this imaginative education research group is to try to work out some of the implications of this way of thinking about the imagination that have practical implications for teaching in the everyday classroom. Okay, so the first question, I suppose, is what is the imagination? And it's basically, the imagination is our ability to think of the possible and not just the actual. And of course, it's the source of invention, novelty, flexibility in the mind. And one contribution I will make today to the jargon of education is to talk a little bit about cognitive tools. This is a term somewhat used by Lev Vygotsky. You may be familiar with his use of cognitive tools, but I will be elaborating it in somewhat different ways. And these are basically tools invented by our ancestors that enable us to think more effectively and make better sense of the world we're a part of. And they're tools because they're just devices to help us to do things that we couldn't do without them. So we would be wise to use them. Now I keep pressing these buttons and nothing's happening. Hang on. Okay, here we go. So, I'll talk about toolkits that we develop that come along with features of our minds, and first of all, I will talk about what I'm here calling somatic tools. That is, we are an animal that has a body, and we are indeed an embodied animal. And I'm glad to see that each of you today has very considerately brought your body with you. And if you have done this, it means that you have a bunch of tools for making sense of the world around you. So I'll first explore just a very few of these. I'm not going to do all of them, but just quite quickly. The first, of course, is the senses. We have sight, hearing, touch, etc., etc. We sometimes forget in classrooms that children bring a range of senses to the task of making sense of the lessons that we are teaching them. And it would be always useful to help us to think about teaching if we remember that our children feel and touch and see and all the rest of it, and we can use all of these modalities in helping them to learn. Whoops-a-daisy. This thing keeps wanting me to become a member of Unimore's system here. Okay. Hooray! We've got some emotions. Okay. We forget maybe that one of the tools that you get with a human body is a bunch of emotions. And as you sit here, you are feeling a vast array of different emotions, each of us, and I don't want to explore in too much detail the ones that you're feeling at the moment. Horror, distress, boredom, I mean, the range of emotions that are available to human beings. And we sometimes forget a little, maybe, that the children in front of us in our classes also have a range of emotions. And it's a good idea to be aware of this. And it is the case, we need to remember, from the beginnings of our lives to the ends of our lives, that the most powerful tool we have for making sense of our world is first, always, an emotional one. We grasp the world emotionally and then sort it out in other ways if we can. But if we don't make an emotional connection, there is no hope for other modes of understanding. So if you have a group of students and you cannot make any emotional connection with the topic you're teaching, you may as well stop. All you will do is bore them. So the trick is to recognize the emotional content of whatever you're teaching, whether it's the fact that alternate interior angles of a parallelogram are congruent, or some historical event. All of these have profound and powerful emotional features, and the job of the teacher is to locate those, bring them out, and make the connection for the student with the knowledge we want them to learn. Often we hear this phrase about we should teach from what the student already knows and work from there. And this is quite a good principle if you want to bore children out of their minds, or at least if you forget that what children know also involves their emotions. They know love and hate and fear and passion. So these are the prime tools that we can start with. So if we want to start with what the student knows, we might start initially by thinking of what they feel, how they feel and how they emotionally can grasp the world. Another quick tool that we get with the human body is a sense of humor. And I think we too rarely remember that humor is one of our tools for making sense of the world around us. It is not coincidental that the smile appears in every child, almost regardless of how bad their circumstances are, within a number of weeks or months of birth. You know that any child will respond to peekaboo, peekaboo. And one of my favorite examples is if you have a 6-month-old or a 9-month-old baby lying down in front of you, you can play a little game that starts by going bzzz, and then pat it on the belly. So bzzz, and the baby will look at you strangely, and then the third time you do it, bzzz, they will smile, and then after you've done it a few times, because they then recognize that these utterly arbitrary sounds and sights and touches are a game. They form a unit of some kind, a meaningful unit has been created by the repetition of these activities. And then after a while of doing this, you can go, bzzz. Babies are great to play with, but what you have there is a unit of meaning that is centered on the fact that human beings come with a sense of humor. And we have to remember that everything you teach has some humorous part of it, that we will enhance students' understanding to the degree that we can bring that out. So all of these are little tools, little factories of understanding that help us to enrich what it is that we teach students. And if we ignore that and focus only on getting the content across so they can repeat it in the exam, we will bore them, they will not remember it, they will not learn it very well. Okay, so that's simple. So those are very few, and there are many more, tools that you have if you have a body. And now what happens to us, here we go again. Maybe I should just sign into Unimore and tell them that I'm happy the way I am. No? We're getting somewhere. Zoom, okay. So, about ages 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5, we typically, if you're in a language-using environment, as a human being, you learn unresistingly a language. And every oral language comes with a new toolkit for making sense of the world. So we have the toolkit of our bodies, and now we have this whole new toolkit of oral language that comes along. And I'll look rather quickly at a few of the components of this, what I'm calling Mythic. Mythic because it's very much the toolkit that you find available in any oral culture. And they use things like stories, binary opposites, rhyme, rhythm, patterns, jokes, humor, mystery, mental images, things like this. So I'll just look at a few of those to get a sense of what the Mythic, the oral language-based toolkit looks like. So the first is the story. What is a story? Well, we all recognize stories. I mean, one simple definition would be to suggest that a story is it's a way of making us feel, telling us how to feel about its contents. That stories organize emotion. That's what their prime function is, not just to convey information, but to tell you how to feel about it. So all those once upon a time things don't only tell you incidental stuff, but they're about feelings. And it is not coincidental that in all cultures throughout the world, particularly oral cultures, the most profound features of those cultures are their myth stories. Their corpus of myth stories are what tell you who you are, what you're doing here, where you're going to go after death, etc. And the same is true of us. Typically, a human being born in Italy today, in the next few years, will learn a story about being Italian and its past and present, and they will die believing whatever they have picked up in those first few years. So we clearly are an animal that is designed to recognize certain kinds of stories very early in our lives because they tell us who we are, what kind of society we are a part of. And typically, whatever commitment that story engages us in remains with us forever. You'll be very surprised to learn that the English also tell their children stories about being English, and they finish up with quite different views about what it means. And strangely, even the French, I can't understand it, but all nations, it would be wrong to say they brainwash their children. It's just that inevitably we are designed as the kind of animal with the kind of brain that is designed to fit us into and make us harmonious with a particular kind of culture. We can't not do this. We can try to do it better than sometimes we do, but this is just one of the tools that we have available. So we would be very silly in education to ignore this. And one of the things I will be talking about throughout this is how we can take these tools and shape the content of the curriculum. Any feature of the curriculum is shapeable to bring out its emotional content. And that's what stories will do for us. Here's a simple example. He says, this is a little story. A girl crossed the street. The girl crossed the street to help the little boy who had fallen off his bicycle. You feel this is a nice girl, right? Very sweet. But then we learn she only wanted to help him because she saw that he had a 50-euro bill poking out of his pocket and she wanted to take it. Now you begin to feel, what a mean girl. Oh, whoa, yeah. But then we learn the girl had seen that the boy had stolen the money from an old lady and was getting the money back to give it back to the old lady. She's a good girl again. We feel she's good. But then we discover the boy had only stolen the money because his family was very poor. Oh, shoot. Was very poor, and he was getting the money to buy an operation in the hospital to save his sister's life or something. I don't know how to stop this happening. Okay. So what that story has done in a very crude way is to show you how the contents of the story manipulate how you feel about the story. And that's what stories are for. They're for shaping some features of the world into a unit, and that unit has a determinate emotional impact on the hearer. So stories are about shaping our emotions. And everything you teach, all the curricula in the galaxy, all have stories, and we want students to make those emotional connections. So the story becomes very important. And here we're suggesting that, again, some people think of storytelling and teaching as telling fictional stories about the events or people or whatever it might be. But this is not really what I'm wanting to discuss today, but rather the way in which story forms underlie math, science, physics, history, geography, and how we can bring out the emotional importance of the subject. And that's what imaginative education is supposed to be. Now, if you look at the typical stories that young children enjoy, say, at age 4 or 5, things like the Grimm fairy tales, you can see that they're built on binary opposites. The narrative is simply an elaboration of a conflict between good and evil, hope, despair, love, hate, security, fear, etc. So you can find under the surface of all the powerful stories of the Grimm brothers and others, these kinds of conflicts going on. And the conflicts are abstract ones. We never learn more abstract ideas than good, evil, and security and fear, etc. Though the bizarre folklore of education is that young children are, in quotes, concrete thinkers, whatever that means. But we see them using the most abstract ideas human beings ever learn from ages 2, 3, 4, 5 on. And also these binary opposites are affective. They're emotionally charged. Good and evil, hope, despair, security, fear, etc. are like that. So these are tools also that we have available to organize any class, any lesson we want to teach, because the binary opposites that are components of a story are like grappling tools. You know, if you want to grasp onto something new, you grasp onto it first in an emotional way that is built on some binary opposite that you can use to give you a first hold on it. And then you can elaborate from those and mediate between them and develop more sophisticated conceptions. Okay. Okay, let me. If you look at the kinds of things that fill children's minds, there are things like talking middle-class rabbits, and you have, again, a lot of the folklore of education is that children's minds are caught up with the world around them, and if you want to build a curriculum, you start with what children know and their daily experience, and build from there. And you have to ask, if that's the case, why are they so interested in talking middle-class rabbits? Again, I haven't been in Reggio, Emilia very long, but I haven't seen any talking middle-class rabbits. Maybe you have a lot here, but most places don't. So where are they coming from? Why are these kinds of strange creatures so important in children's minds and the stories that they're most engaged by? It's not coincidental that children enjoy stories to do with talking rabbits and bears and all the rest of it. Here's a kind of quick and dirty explanation. If you think of how we make sense of the phenomenal world, the physical world around us, we might begin by learning, for example, get a conceptual grasp on temperature by first learning hot and cold. Hot means hotter than my body, and cold is colder than my body. So I've got a grasp on the temperature continuum, and then I can mediate between those two and develop a concept like warm. And I can mediate between warm and cold and develop a concept like cool. This is going to drive me mad. Hang on. Da-da-da-dum. Aha. Oh, can you actually see that? It looks... well, in the first row you can, but back there, who knows? It's okay, it doesn't matter. So now you probably have noticed in human life that not everything is made up of hot and cold, big and little, hard and soft, but there are other things that every 4-year-old child tends to learn, that there is an opposition between life and death. Some things are alive and some things are death. What? Don't do it, don't jump! It wasn't that bad. I'd like to go back to Canada and say one of the students was so unhappy she leapt out of the window. So you've got a little tool working that enables you. It doesn't really matter. It does. It's usually the technology that takes over. This is okay. Thank you. So we're on life and death at the moment, if you remember. Back to life and death. So you have this little toolkit that's enabling you to say hot, cold, warm, warm, cold, cool, warm, hot, pretty hot. And you develop a conceptual grasp over the temperature continuum. And then after a while you learn a bunch of numbers that are arbitrary and are another way of expressing it. But you still stick with hot and cold. But with life and death, what happens if you apply that same tool to life and death? When you come to mediate, what do you get? Well, bless you. Don't die. This is a catastrophic group. There's people throwing themselves at anything to... Okay, so you get a ghost. Okay, ghosts are both alive and dead in the same way that warm is hot and cold. And you have a bunch of other things between life. Angels, for example. No, are angels? I'm not sure. Do they categorize themselves as alive? But there are a bunch of creatures, imaginary beings, I shouldn't say that, that are somewhere between life and death, or involve both. They mediate between them. And then all children learn very rapidly. There are differences between human animals and all the other kinds of animals. So what do you get if you mediate between humans and other animals? Well, you get Yetis and Sasquatches. Are these familiar? You know about the Yetis? Yeti? I mean, I haven't met one here, I know, but so we look for these kinds of creatures, and there's a fascination with looking in the Himalayas for Yetis because somehow they're a kind of monster, like Frankenstein's monster, that somehow is somewhere between in this case, the human and the animal. So those mediations remain very powerful for us because they have been initially a way we've made sense of our physical world, and it's been very effective with the physical world. But it's not so good with life and death and human and animal and nature and culture. All children recognize there's a difference between natural things and like trees and everything else you can see in this room that is culturally transformed in one way or another. And what do you get if you mediate between nature and culture? Well, you get talking middle-class rabbits. That is, you get in the mediating categories of life, death, human, animal, nature, culture, you get the content of all the most powerful stories for children that have ever been written, and also the myth stories of the world. So we're not dealing with something trivial, we're dealing with something fundamental to the way human beings have made and continue to make sense of the world around them. So if we're storytelling animals that are shaping our experience in stories, one of the crucial components of that shaping is the binary opposites and their use. Now, they're so powerful, of course, we know that they have been abused as well. Particularly of late, people have explored the ways in which female and passive have been used in societies to have deleterious effects on the way we make sense of each other's experience. And here we go again. We should time this. Oh, come on. Hooray, hooray, okay. Well, this convinces me to go on to the next one. So we're going to look at jokes and humor. Another feature of learning an oral language is that you learn that you can both lie but also tell jokes. What is a joke? What does a joke do? Particularly those jokes that young children seem to enjoy. Knock, knock, who's there? Mickey Mouse's underwear. Do you know? In North America, there are these knock-knock jokes. Are they familiar? And endless plays on words that make... In English, there is a joke that says, when is a door not a door? And the answer is, when it's a jar. Okay, a jar has two meanings. A jar is a glass thing that you might drink from. But it also means, a jar means a door that is partly open. So when is a door not a door? When it's a jar. Ha, ha, ha. We all fall around laughing. What's going on with these kinds of jokes is that they make language visible. Okay, those kinds of jokes work because they make language visible and in a way that enables children to see how language can be used and also enjoyed. And I must have something else to say. Here we go. Yes, and it also helps us to fight against the conventionalizing of the world around us, because we're constantly given to understand, particularly if you ever are crazy enough to read educational textbooks, that it's a serious business. By serious, they mean dull, boring, tedious beyond belief. But if we remember that we are an animal that has a sense of humor, and that the joke is a superb tool for increasing the flexibility and sophistication of our language use, then we might be a little bit more open to using jokes in classrooms much more. Not just telling the crude kinds of jokes, but if you think hang on, sorry, I've got a note here that somebody else has written. Okay. So the joke becomes a way. I occasionally in Canada with my graduate students, I've tried to persuade them to throw away the typical language texts they use. You know, you get these publishers producing these, teach English language more efficiently, and they sell huge numbers, and teachers rely on them to get the children to be able to learn how to use a metaphor and what it means. And I try to say, why don't you throw all those away and create at least maybe 20 minutes or half an hour every day for telling jokes. And then you get the children to invent jokes, and you give them homework to find out some jokes. And my guarantee is that at the end of the year, the students will score much better on all their English language tests than they do if they have the usual kinds of textbooks and stuff. But anyway, you might not believe me, but it's true. Okay, another tool that comes along with an oral language is the ability to form images in the mind. So if I tell you about a teacher, sorry, this is boring, you've heard this before. No, a teacher working hard all day, a day like this, very hot. She's driving back along the highway, sun on the windscreens of the cars coming the other direction, got a headache. But she knows that when she gets home, at the back of her house, there is a Japanese garden. And she knows that she can take a cup of tea out to the Japanese garden. And she has a chair, and there is a grey stone wall built around the garden, and a moss garden inside it. And there is a pond, and she notices that 3 red water lilies have opened that day on the pond. So she sits drinking her tea, admiring the water lilies, and watching the goldfish and the koi swim among them. Now, what's happened? I have sucked air into my lungs and gradually let it out over the larynx and the pharynx and shaped it with the tongue, and the noise has created images in your mind. This is fairly extraordinary. We take it for granted, but it's a peculiar thing for us to do. But at the same time, the creation of a mental image in another mind is one of the most potent ways we have of engaging other people in understanding what we mean, and also making anything engaging, because the more you can create images, the more powerful the message is carried over. Everything we teach, every topic, in every subject area has mental images as a part of it. And part of the trick for us as teachers is to work out what are the important images that are central to the meaning of what it is we want to teach, and bring those forward, because the image will carry the message much more readily and easily than simply repeating the facts again and again. Okay, sorry about my throat. And you're familiar with metaphors, I'm sure. Metaphor is basically a tool that enables us to talk about one thing in terms of another, and it is the source of nearly all creativity, imaginative engagement in the world. The better you are at metaphors, recognizing and generating metaphors, the more flexible and powerful your thinking will be. So the metaphor is one of the great tools we have. I suggest with the students often that one of the easiest ways to deal with metaphors in schools is to have a competition. If you are a primary school teacher, for example, you could just have a big piece of paper on the wall of the classroom, and you would have a competition, an ongoing competition for the best metaphor that any student has heard. So you might either hear a metaphor or invent a metaphor, and you can add it to the piece of paper, and at the end of the week there is a competition for the best metaphor. And you can do the best metaphor of the month. And then at the end of the year you can have the Oscars for the best metaphor of the year. What tends to happen with this is that children very rapidly, you don't have to explain to them too much what a metaphor is, because they recognize, they see it happening by the way people put the examples up. and also one of the things they immediately recognize is nearly all language is made up of metaphors, that nearly everything that we say is, somebody called them, is a graveyard of metaphors. But so again, it's just another of the tools that comes along with an oral language. This one I'm going to miss because while it's good in English, it may be less good for non-native English speakers, I think. So anyway, one of the things we have been doing in the Imaginative Education Research Group is trying to work out how you take observations like this and design ways to help teachers plan teaching so that they draw on these kinds of insights rather than see teaching as the attainment of objectives. And you're familiar, I'm sure, as every person in education across the galaxy seems to be, about the planning frameworks that start with stating your objectives and gathering your content, arranging the methods you're going to use, and the evaluation procedure you will use to make sure you've taught and achieved your objectives. Is that familiar? That not everybody looks as though either they understand what I'm talking about or know about the principle. But is that familiar? I mean, is it something people teach here in Italy, that when teacher training programs are... Let me forget this one then. If it's so anyway, what we're trying to do is look at ways in which we can think of teaching as storytelling, that is using some of these features of the ways you would make sense of your world that can bring out these aspects of teaching. Let me give you a very quick example. I'll do this one. Okay, so the task we have is to teach place value. That is the difference between the value of a 2 in the number 12 and the value of a 2 in 27, for example. Decimalization, I guess, the decimal system. So we need to teach this in grade 2. So the way we're going to do it is have a story about a king who wants to count his army in the Middle Ages. Oops. Oh, here we go. I think all I need to do is just leave it and it'll come back. So the king wants to count his army, and he's got a group of rather dull counselors and one clever counselor. And the clever counselor says, "Oh, look, king, what you need to do is get each of the stupid counselors to pick up 10 stones each, just 10 pebbles." So they go around and get 10 pebbles. And then he says, you need a table, and then in front of each of the counselors, you put a bowl. And then you march the army off to battle or wherever they're going. And every time a soldier goes by the end of the table, the counselor at the end puts a stone in his bowl. And when the 10 stones are down, he just picks them up again. So he has a really exciting afternoon doing this as the soldiers go by. And then the counselor to his left, who for gender equity purposes should be she, watches him, and every time he picks up his stones, she puts one down. So she has a slightly duller afternoon. And then when she picks her 10 up, the counselor to her left puts one down. So the same routine. So at the end of the afternoon, there's 1, 3, 0, 2, 7 stones in the bowl. So we know there are 13,027 soldiers in the army. Now, if you were teaching this to a group of children in grade 2, you would take more than the 1 minute and 30 seconds I've taken to describe it. Two things tend to happen. One is that the children learn the algorithm much more quickly. They learn the math. They learn how to do decimal systems. They know that the 0 is important because it's, it has a role in the larger numbers. And the second thing that happens that in some ways is equally important is that they make an emotional commitment, an emotional association with the cleverness of the clever counselor who's invented the system for counting. So they make a positive association with the nature of mathematics itself. And if you do that constantly and they don't have to be fictional stories, they can be all kinds of ways of doing this. It tends to have very positive effects on the way kids learn math. Now, I had here also an activity for you, but I think given the time and the heat, we'll skip it. What I'll do is fairly quickly just run through the kinds of tools, some additional tools that you get with literate, when you become literate. So we've got a bunch of tools that came with our body, a bunch of tools that come with an oral language, and now I want to look at a bunch of tools that come with literacy. I'll come back to this principle later, but it emphasizes the fact that all the knowledge in the curriculum and all the knowledge we deal with is human knowledge, and it grows out of human hopes and fears and passions. An imaginative engagement with knowledge comes from learning in the context of the hopes and fears and passions from which it's grown or in which it finds a living meaning. And a lot of what we do in schools, unfortunately, tends to lose touch with that, the bases of the human hopes and fears and passions that actually are what give the curriculum life and meaning and a sense of wonder. Okay, so here we have what I'm calling romantic understanding. This is these toolkits give us distinctive kinds of understanding of the world. So now with a written language, we get a new way of making sense of our experience. And I'll skip a few of these because time's getting on and we have other things to talk about. Well, I find this attractive. You're maybe familiar with Plato's Phaedrus. In the Phaedrus, there's a story about Socrates tells about the great Egyptian god Tot. Tot was a very entrepreneurial god, and he invented all kinds of things like dice and astronomy, and he also invented writing. But in those days, of course, you needed a bit of venture capital to get astronomy off the ground, and dice rolling and stuff like this. So he had to go to Thamus, who was the chief god of Egypt. And so Tot says to Thamus, I've got these wonderful adventures, but I needed some money to get them launched, to set up an IPO so people will buy shares in my company. And Thamus says, well, show me what you've got, and we'll see. And he said, well, there's this great game of dice, that you can throw the dice and it'll keep the workers happy. And he said, oh, great idea. I'll certainly fund that. And then he says, there's this astronomy stuff too. It's great because when you go out on a boat, you don't have to stick by the coastline. You can go right across the ocean and guide yourself by the stars. It's a terrific idea. I'll buy that one too. And they said, but I've saved the best for all. It's called writing. That you don't have to remember everything now. You can write it down, and then later you can go back and read it. And Thamus said, basically, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. He said, it's useless. And what he says is wrong with this. It says that the discovery of the alphabet will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember of themselves. He says, your invention is not an aid to memory. You give your disciples not truth, but only the semblance of truth. They will be the hearers of many things and they will learn nothing. What does that remind you of? We call it school. Okay, maybe not. What it tries to do is make clear that literacy itself doesn't necessarily bring the benefits that I'm going to talk about, but we have to do it properly. In the move from an oral to a literate culture, you can see in the kinds of stories that engage young children. If you tell a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old child the story of Cinderella, typically she doesn't ask, what's the physics of changing pumpkins into coaches? But the child will accept magic as a means of taking the story forward without a question. But if you tell the 10-year-old the story of Superman, you have to explain that his dad used to be Marlon Brando. He's become somebody else recently. But his father was born on the planet Krypton, and because Krypton was going to blow up, he shot him off into space, and he landed on Earth, and because of the molecular structure of our sun, once he stripped down to his pajamas, he had these superpowers. That is, you have to provide what the philosophers call an etiology for the implausible or the impossible. So you can still have a kind of magic, but in one context you have to create a sense of reality in which it fits. So what happens between Cinderella and Superman is what we call reality. It's the invention of ways of trying to find out what is the truth about the world around us in a different and a new way, and which is the gift and the curse of literacy for us. So, now again, part of the folklore of education is that if you want to start a new subject or topic, you start with what the student already knows and then gradually expand from there. And again, this is a good principle if you want to bore children out of their minds. But if you look at what really engages children at ages 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, it's not the everyday world around them so much as the extremes and the limits of the everyday world around them. They are interested in things like who had the longest fingernails ever. Do you know? It's the stuff of things that the Guinness Book of Records is one of the best-selling books to early teenagers available in the galaxy. And it has been so consistently now for more than 50 years. And you have to ask why. Why does knowledge about who was the fastest or the hairiest or the longest fingernailed person, why is that of such interest to students and adults? And one kind of answer, of course, is that it helps us to get a sense of the limits of reality. Because only if we know what the limits are, the context is, can we make sense of the particulars within it. Can ultimately we make sense of ourselves. If we know who is the biggest person who's ever lived and the smallest person who's ever lived, it gives us a sense of appropriate proportion. So it gives us a kind of security for making sense of our lives. Another one, do you remember what it was like when you were 11 years old? Can you remember being 11? And what you collected, if you had a collection, for example, what you cared about. Here we go again. And why? Why did you feel so passionate about whatever it was that you were collecting at 11? One of the problems, of course, of being 11 is that you are constantly threatened by the world around you. You know that there's routines you have to fit into. You have to obey school rules, school timetables. You have to wear what your mother tells you, etc., etc. So that at a time when your ego is developing, you're at the same time hemmed in by the world that you don't really entirely understand. So what do? Well, like every other 11-year-old, you make an association with someone or something that can best overcome the threats that hold you in. So if you're an 11-year-old girl, you associate, this is just gender stereotyping, but if you're an 11-year-old girl, as an example, you might form an association with Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is quite big in Vancouver. If you're a boy, an Italian boy, and you recognize that Juventus has just got Cristiano Ronaldo, you form. Now, Lady Gaga has the power, the freedom, the money that the girl lacks. Ronaldo has the strength, the skill, the money that the boy lacks. So we associate with those things that are best able to enable us to get over the threats that hold us in. None of these tools goes away as we get older. So I'll give you 5 seconds to think about who your heroes are. Your hero, the person you think of as most heroic. It could be an idea even, but think of a person that you hold in highest esteem as your hero. So, okay, time up. So what it tells you about, if you've been good students and done what the teacher told you, it tells you a little bit about what you remain insecure about. Okay, so that's the purpose of these associations with the heroic is it helps us to overcome what we feel as what's hemming us in, limiting us. So it helps us to overcome our insecurities. So you might try it on your students someday, or your children. Okay. Another strange thing is that every child about 7 begins a hobby or a collection, reaches a peak of intensity about ages 10 or 11, dies out about 15. What the hell is going on? It's at the same time often among the most engaging thing for students at those ages. It's being replaced by social media, of course, somewhat now. But that has the same engaging quality. So why? If you read lots of textbooks about education, and this is one of the most powerful cognitive engagements of students at these ages, it is surprising that you will never read a word about it in educational textbooks. And you think, what's going wrong here? There's something strange in all this. Anyway, again, it's the same. Similarly, it helps to give a sense of the scale of reality and helps to place yourself within it, so that if you learn everything about Victorian postage stamps, you have a sense that the world is not limitless. It gives you some security in making sense of the possibilities that everything can be made sense of, even though you can't make sense of very much of it at the time. Last item, I promise, for this section. I try to persuade my students that there is no knowledge in the libraries, there is no knowledge in the internet, there is no knowledge in the textbooks that we have available. Which is what Tamus was trying to point out to Tot, the god Tot. And what we have in these places are codes, and codes that we have invented that represent knowledge. One of the, I think, the great problems in education at the moment is that people do not distinguish well between the codes and the knowledge. The only source of knowledge is living human tissue in our brains, okay? That's the only form of knowledge. Outside of that, words, letters, these are all codes that we have created to try to, in some inadequate way, to represent the knowledge that we learn. Plato, in the 7th letter, sensibly observed that anybody who writes something down and expects somebody to read and understand it is a fool. And so he wrote it all down too. But Plato played games, of course. Plato is not a person to read straight. He's somebody who is constantly playing games with his hearers to try to get beyond the limits of what language will allow him to express. So, and of course, what we do in schools is we test students' knowledge by asking them to repeat codes. And if they can repeat the code, we count that as a sufficient achievement. So we tick off they have got that knowledge. And they may not at all. They may just be repeating stuff that has no real meaning to them. And we all know this, but this is just a way of stating it. Okay, so there's a bunch of cognitive tools. What we've been trying to do with those is have different kinds of frameworks to teach students topics in, from about ages 8 to about 15. And I should give you an example or two. Here's 2 examples. Which would you like? Would you like to learn about eels, or would you like to learn about interior opposite angles are congruent? Eels? Eels it is, okay. Nobody else got a choice, so that's it. What do you know about eels? Do you know, the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians used to love to eat eels. They were a great delicacy, and they had almost as many or maybe more recipes as you have here for pasta. There was one small problem with the eels. That was nobody had ever seen a pregnant one. So if there were no pregnant eels, where were they coming from? Because they lived in the rivers, and you could see them and you could catch them. No pregnant eels. Okay. So that's our problem. Aristotle believed that when horses drank from the water in a river, occasionally the hair would fall from their mane and get stuck in the mud at the bottom of the river, and out of that would grow elvers, that is, baby eels. So he thought, and as Chomsky said, a bad theory is better than no theory at all. Gives you something to work from. It took about 2,500 years or so before anybody began to work out where all the eels were coming from. Would you like to know? €5? No. Okay, so we set up our story. We need a hero, right? So the hero of our story is a Dane from Denmark called Johannes Schmidt. Now, at the end of the 19th century, some guys have been capturing things from the Mediterranean and finding larvae and putting them in a tank. And certain of the larvae turned into baby eels. So Schmidt took up the job of trying to find out where they were coming from. And first of all, he went around the Mediterranean, taking samples of all over the place, and realized that the closer he got to the Straits of Gibraltar, the smaller the larvae were. So being one smart Dane, he realized they were coming in from the Atlantic. So he then spent 20 years or more renting or rusting old ships, and he got a bunch of sea captains, about a dozen of them, at various times, to take samples from the water and label where he got them. And gradually, and he sailed all over the place, up to the Arctic, down to the Azores, across to the Bahamas, etc., constantly finding smaller and smaller larvae, until finally he located where all the larvae came from. So the larvae that feed the rivers of the east coast of North America and the rivers of Europe all come from the same place. Do you know where that is? Sorry? I can't hear you. I don't know the answer. I was just hoping you'd tell me. No. It's it's the Sargasso Sea. The Sargasso Sea is an area off Florida and up a bit, and it's very reedy. And you've probably seen pictures of it, in fact, with these reeds that got. Anyway, the eels get up to something there, and the larvae then float on the ocean currents, sometimes for as many as a couple of years. They change sex a few times, and then one day they say, yeah, I'll be a female. And then they go back to the rivers of Europe and the east coast of North America. And then in the rivers they live for 10 years, and then head back for the Sargasso Sea. And we still don't know what proportion make it. So if you have nothing to do in your next holiday, you might want to try and find out how many eels make it back. Now, again, you would take more than 3 minutes to tell the story if you were teaching this with children, and you would explore the clues and the larvae that were available, and how you would find out, gradually learn along with Johannes Schmidt where the clues were taking you. Now, what the student does in this case is learn at least as much as the students who normally do it by looking at the diagrams and this is what they did, and draw some examples of the eels, and the usual way that it's, or keep an eel in a tank and see how it feeds and stuff. But they can do all that. They learn everything at least as much as those students, but they do it in a way that engages their imaginations at the same time. So they learn it much better and they remember it much longer. And these are not trivial things, I guess. So again, the final principle is much the same as earlier, that all knowledge is human knowledge, a product of passions and hopes and fears. And if we don't teach children about the knowledge in the context of those hopes and fears and passions, we're wasting our time. Now, if you're interested in these kinds of things, a colleague of mine called Gillian Judson, she has a blog, and it's education that inspires. And if you wanted to just sign up, she would be very happy to have you signed up. And she would, I think every week she sends out another blog about features of imaginative education and its use in everyday classrooms. And I think that's the end. Okay, thank you. I guess we're done. Okay. No, thank you. I think you're heroic to sit on a warm afternoon and listen to this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Grazie veramente, no, credo che appunto di poter dire a nome di tutti che è stato estremamente interessante questa lezione, estremamente ricca di, diciamo, di elementi, e quindi credo che ci sia la possibilità di porre domande, insomma no, di far emergere magari qualche questione su cui possiamo fermarci, ecco, insieme a riflettere. E quindi niente, possiamo cominciare a porre qualche domanda. Io inviterei le persone a venire qui a fare la domanda, nel senso che sarebbe meglio usare il microfono per fare la domanda, insomma, in modo che poi possa, diciamo, possa in qualche modo anche essere più chiaro diciamo, lo sviluppo del nostro discorso, se no poi le persone non sentono. Qualcuno che vuole rompere il ghiaccio? Perfetto, la professoressa Bartolini che rompe il ghiaccio, molto bene. Grazie Maria.
Thank you, Kieran, very much for your talk. I was really interested, although I already knew some of your ideas. I appreciated this general presentation. And I wonder whether you have read the book by Bill Barton, The Language of Mathematics, Telling Mathematical Tales. That it is very interesting in the sense that it is about mathematics. That you have mentioned mathematics, but it is usually considered a discipline where narratives are not. And in this case, Bill Barton introduced really narratives in mathematics, but from a multicultural perspective. And this is my question. Because you have mentioned something that surely is very easy to understand for us, because we can feel at ease in this description that you have made. But I wonder whether you have tried, or somebody, you know, that somebody has tried to extend your approach also to other different cultures. And I am making you an example. We have mentioned the baby who is smiling at the mother. Some months ago, we had a master thesis in our program for pre-primary and primary school teachers, and I do not remember the family name, but I remember the name of the student, who was Jada, and studied what she called the twice special children that are immigrant, and so they are special, and they have a diagnosis of autism. And the problem is that, and the story is interesting, because she has analyzed a lot of literature, and she discovered in the literature there are some cultures where crossing the ice is forbidden, crossing the ice between children and adults. And so this is something that, for instance, in Italy, by the doctors who are making the diagnosis of autism, not being able to cross the ice is considered as a symptom, a possible symptom of borderline autism. And so she claimed in the master thesis that drawing, also exploiting a lot of literature, that it was surely necessary to have this kind of transposition from one culture to another, because something that could be considered as a symptom of something in a culture could not be. And I told this story in my classroom, and one of my students raised the hand and tells, I can confirm what you say. And she was a black student, and I didn't know. And she said, I had many problems in learning to cross my eyes, because in my original culture, I was forbidden. And I asked her, when did you discover this? And she said, this morning, while you were speaking. Yes, and so just to come back to your presentation, the presentation that you have done is surely very appealing for us who are living in the Western culture, and I could sign everything that you said. But my question is, as to your knowledge, is there somebody who has tried to transpose your approach to other cultures that are very different from ours? And so maybe they do not share the same narratives that you have told us and so on. This is my question.
Thank you. Yeah, and to some degree, my answer is I don't know, except that we have subgroups of the IERG, the Imaginative Education Research Group, in China, in Korea, in Japan, in Africa, in South America. So nearly every country in the world has some people who are using these methods in their classrooms. But it's very hard making generalizations, of course, about cultural features, because there's always going to be exceptions, and one doesn't know enough ever to be able to put it in a way that covers all of the examples. And I'm no doubt guilty of not adequately representing some features. The sets of cognitive tools, the ones to do with bodies, are pretty standard across cultures. The ones to do with an oral language are also fairly valid across all cultures that I've had any knowledge about. The romantic ones, are a bit less common across cultures, because the higher we go, the more variation is available. Now, the next two stages, which I haven't talked about, there is a philosophic set, cognitive tools, which I haven't mentioned, and they are more varied because they are building on largely Western concepts. And the final one is called ironic understanding. And irony is not, it's not favored in many cultures. If you're an English person giving lectures in America, you recognize very quickly that irony is not equally recognized and appreciated in different cultures. So I recognize that, as it were, the more sophisticated the toolkits, the less secure are the claims about cross-cultural features. But we do have students who've done theses on these kinds of things, and we do have groups in every country pretty well that I know of. So it's a little bit more. It's not just Italy and Canada. Right. But thank you.
Ecco, grazie. Oh, sorry. Perfetto. Ecco. Qualche altra domanda? Sì. Verrebbe a dirla qua, per favore. No, è che se no dopo non riusciamo ad avere le domande che restano, le domande. Sarebbe meglio venire qui.
Or could we repeat the question?
Ma io sono un po'... siccome dopo non sento.
I had such a curiosity, just not a question maybe, but just a curiosity. You were talking at the beginning about that joke that you did with children, those, like that you create. Can't do that. Well, okay, so we just get an understanding. So, I mean, my question is, you said that by repetition you created a meaningful unit, and then at the end, when the children laugh, because this unit was broken, because like you had the repetition of that unit, and then you had a delay with that sound. Why? I mean, my curiosity is about why did they laugh? Why do they laugh? What creates this reaction of amusement or joy or whatever? Why does it? Why? What creates that? What? That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have said a bit more. I mean, what we are learning to do at that age is bring together our various senses. So it is a delight, first of all, to bring together sight, hearing, touch in a unit. So that gives a pleasure. Aristotle says the fulfillment of any of our natural impulses is pleasurable to human beings. The other feature is that we, first of all, creating that set as a unit, first of all, the recognition that this is not an arbitrary set of things that you see and hear and touch and feel, but is created for a purpose. And on the third or fourth time, what the child begins to recognize is that this purpose, the purpose is a game. And the game is, and they are a part of the game, and they respond appropriately. The delay in going is, it elaborates the game. It makes it more complicated. In the same way that you might find, the way, in literature, we appreciate complicated, more complex works that seem to represent a more sophisticated reality than we do, simple, crude romance stories. So I think those features all come into the reason why, first of all, the children find it funny, and then why they find the variant even funnier, because it's that complexity that I think we all can recognize as what gives us pleasure in our lives. Is that okay? Thank you. One microphone for sale.
Ci sono altre domande? Abbiamo tempo ancora qualche minuto per fare qualche altra domanda. Sì, si può anche fare domande in italiano. Abbiamo anche persone poi che possono tradurre velocemente. Quindi se c'è qualche...
I think everything I said was so clear. There's nothing, no questions to ask.
Questo è vero, it's true. Qualcuno magari che è un po' timido e non ha il coraggio di fare la domanda, eh? Sì, dai, su, venga qua, che ho visto che lei ha una domanda da fare.
I have a question. I think I don't need the microphone.
No, ma it's better. It's better.
Okay. So my question is about when you speak about tools, as we know, tools should be effective, so they should be in good condition. And I'm wondering, in our society nowadays, these tools, especially the somatic tools, are, I feel, very much under some sort of, they're challenged by, especially what you said about this vision being like overwhelmed by all these images coming. So isn't it some kind of duty of education also to, I don't know, do something to somehow preserve these tools in good condition?
Yeah.
Because otherwise the whole process is somehow compromised, because it starts from there.
Right.
So if the basic tools are not proper, then how can you go to the following steps?
Exactly. Yeah. No, thank you. I agree. I have nothing to add. I think that you put it very well, and that all seems to me exactly right. Yeah. Courageous gentleman.
During the introduction, Professor Contini mentioned Brunner, and maybe I was wondering if in your thought and in development of it, he has had a role, in particular in the second part, in the second period of his life, where the narrative structure and the scientific thought became to get together in some way. And I was wondering if in your own teaching structure, these levels, like the somatic, mythic, romantic levels, are not thought as maybe Brunner thought his own levels of development, in a sense in which your levels are more united and less separated, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. I have no idea. I've always admired Brunner's writing, but I haven't read a lot of it. I shouldn't say that. But it's very enriching, and so I'm not really familiar too much. I mean, I've used some of his ideas and quoted him now and then, but he wasn't particularly influential in the forming the ways I was thinking about things, because I was more reading people like Vygotsky, and when it comes to things like romantic understanding, much more interested in people like Northrop Frye and various literary critics, and looking at the earlier stages, people like Claude Lévi-Strauss, and Malinowski, and people like this, so that I was much more interested in the anthropological writers and the literary critics, and then for the philosophic stuff, Ludwig Wittgenstein. We have a shared interest in Wittgenstein, and if anybody else has here, my son has a book coming out from Oxford University Press in the next month or so. Please buy it. It's on Wittgenstein and Heidegger, about a one laugh from beginning to end. It's sorry, but thank you. I'm just not that familiar with Brunner, I'm afraid. But thank you.
Yes, no, absolutely. Questions? Altre domande? Sì.
I have a question regarding the idea of myth and the idea of somatic cognitive tools that you were talking about. I was thinking about rituals. Do rituals fit inside maybe the idea of rhythm and music that you were talking about, or do they fit someplace else in terms of education?
Yes, thank you. As you may have noted, I skipped a number of the tools. One had to do with patterns and the ways in which human beings recognize and use patterns of various kinds. And of course, being, I suppose, influenced by Lévi-Strauss, and earlier The Savage Mind, and then his books on mythology, it's hard to escape the importance of ritual in those. But I must admit, I never quite knew what to do with it. So I haven't developed any clear notions from the importance of ritual in other cultures, and have been more, I suppose, influenced by the kinds of narratives that they used for making sense. And there seemed to be a sort of arbitrariness about some ritual features of oral cultures that, again, I never quite knew what to do with. I just didn't learn enough, I suppose. But I think it's a good principle, a good idea, and the patterning feature of human minds, and that is developed in this book somewhat. Yeah. We can wait you out. I think they want to go home. Have they got to stay here? You can't leave until you ask a question. Right.
Yes, is the book, yes. Comprensione multipla. In English is...
in English it's The Educated Mind by University of Chicago Press.
Yes.
Oh, all of them. I don't know. If you were a teacher, there's a very little book called Teaching is Storytelling that has sold more than all of the others put together. And I put that down to the fact that it's very short. But there's a book also that one of my colleagues uses a lot called something like Imagination in Teaching and Learning. I can't remember, but the other one, of course, is the Learning in Depth book, which introduces a new curriculum element that as some teachers are beginning to use here, and is being used in about 22 different countries now. It's about 10 years old, but it's spreading quite rapidly, and having, I think, I could describe it if you have a moment. I mean, this is so you have to imagine in the future. You start school, within a week or so there's a ceremony, and in the ceremony each child is given a topic, like apples, the circus, railroads, beetles, bees, birds, trees, and each child in a class has a different topic, and they study that topic for the full 12 years of schooling. They take 1 hour a week, every week, and they do work on developing their portfolio on bees or apples or whatever it might be. So that by the end of schooling, using 1 hour a week, every child, by the time they finish their schooling, is an expert on something. They know as much as almost anybody on earth about this particular topic. Easy to organize, the educational return is enormous, the expenditure on time and energy is very small. Who wouldn't go for it? Well, lots of people. Who wouldn't buy a Tesla car? No, that's another issue. But, oh, right, yeah. So, and it's a very simple program, and the students choose to do what they want. Once they've got their topic, they explore it however they want. If you've got the topic of apples and want to study apples in art for a year, you can do that. So it's student-driven, student-directed, but it means that every student becomes an expert in a way that has never been true in schooling, in the history of schooling. Within the first year, every student knows more than their teacher about their topic. Not a common experience for most students. For many students, it's intoxicating. Very many of the students who do what we call LID kids, LID, Learning in Depth, say it's by far their most favorite thing in school. They prefer LID time to anything else they do in school. And yet at the same time you'll see them studying details about the anatomy of insects or whatever their topic might be. So it's the dynamics of the program are quite different from what works in the everyday classroom. There is no assessment of this program. The students get help from the teachers, but nobody is assessing them or telling them what they should do. The enthusiasm of the kids astonishes most of the teachers who start the program. Anyway, that's my sales pitch. It works like magic. That's not true. That's a lie. But it works very well.
Puoi dire qualcosa sulla sperimentazione che si sta facendo, Alessandra, adesso a Modena? Proprio due cose che tu sei addentro in quanto collaboratrice del professor Corni.
Il professor Corni, con la collaborazione del professore Giliberti, sta portando avanti nel di Modena, e in particolare da domani e da questa settimana, dove c'è stato questo progetto particolare nell'ambito 9 di Modena, quindi la città di Modena. Scusate, mi sentite? Perché Pronto? Ok, quindi il professor Corni sta portando avanti con il professor Enrico Giliberti nel comune di Modena, in modo particolare da questa settimana nell'ambito 9, una formazione e l'attività poi conseguenti nelle scuole, perché Learning in Depth verrà poi lanciato domani in modo particolare con un incontro al Forum Monzani, appunto nella città di Modena. Le sperimentazioni erano già iniziate l'anno scorso con alcune scuole dell'EC2 di Modena, Formigine, Castelnuovo Rangone e credo alla scuola, all'Istituto Scolastico della Carovana di Modena, insomma. Quindi insomma ci sono alcune scuole che hanno già sperimentato e che stanno continuando, e le insegnanti sono molto entusiaste di questo nuovo approccio. E c'è stata anche insomma, una certa esposizione mediatica su questa cosa, quindi una sperimentazione avviata, e in più, in particolare il Memo di Modena, una persona della sua organizzatrice, sta portando avanti anche questo approccio nelle scuole dell'infanzia, quindi c'è una sperimentazione anche nelle scuole dell'infanzia del comune.
Insomma, magari potrebbero esserci anche le condizioni per far partire una sperimentazione a Reggio Emilia, chissà, no? Adesso magari vedremo. C'è già qualcosa, sì, qualcosa che bolle in pentola, diciamo. Benissimo. C'è qualche altra domanda? O siamo su questo tema del learning in depth? C'è qualche curiosità? Sicuramente è un programma molto innovativo, insomma, quindi anche insegnanti, educatori che sono presenti credo che possano trovare molte sollecitazioni, ecco, credo. Esatto, poi se qualcuno è interessato naturalmente può rivolgersi in particolare al professor Corni, che sicuramente ha seguito tutta questa vicenda anche a Modena, quindi può rivolgersi a lui. Bene, allora se non ci sono altre domande direi che possiamo veramente ringraziare nuovamente il professor Egan, non solo per con un bel applauso.